Rick Sanchez can step into any reality that has ever existed. He can break the laws of physics on a Tuesday afternoon. He has humiliated gods, dismantled governments, and walked the literal devil out of his own shop. And he is, by every measure that actually counts, one of the loneliest beings ever drawn for television. That contradiction is the whole reason for this video. Rick and Morty has been on the air for more than 10 years, and most of the writing about it circles the same few topics. The nihilism, the science fiction, the jokes. What almost nobody talks about is the warning the show has been quietly building underneath all of that. A warning a German philosopher wrote down almost 2 centuries ago. Karl Marx described the kind of person the modern world would eventually produce, and Rick fits the description so closely it stops feeling like coincidence. Tonight, we are walking through every piece of it. Welcome to Ricktopus. If long-form analysis like this is your thing, subscribing is free and it genuinely helps. Let us get into it. The man Marx warned us about. Before we get to Rick, we have to spend a little time with the man who saw him coming. Karl Marx was a German philosopher who lived in the 1800s. He spent most of his life watching the new factories of Europe swallow up the old way of life. He watched farmers leave their fields and walk into smoky industrial cities. He watched craftsmen who used to make whole shoes from start to finish get reduced to one tiny job on an assembly line, doing the same small motion 10,000 times a day. He watched whole families work themselves to exhaustion for almost nothing, while a small handful of men grew wealthier than kings. And while he watched, he wrote thousands of pages across dozens of years, trying to understand what was actually happening to the human soul under all of this. One of his earliest and most important ideas is the one we need tonight. He called it alienation. The word sounds heavy and academic, but the meaning is simple. Marx said that the way the modern economy was set up forced people to become strangers. Strangers to the work they did, strangers to the things they made, strangers to the people next to them, and eventually, strangers to themselves. He said that under the right conditions, this strangeness would grow until certain people in society became almost completely cut off. They would still walk around, they would still talk, they would still seem to function, but something inside them would have gone quiet, and that quiet would never lift. Marx broke this strangeness into 4 parts, and these 4 parts are going to be the spine of everything we discuss tonight, so it is worth taking the slow road through them. The first kind of alienation is alienation from the things you make. Imagine spending your entire day producing something you will never own, never use, and never even see again once it leaves your hands. The thing you build does not belong to you. It belongs to someone else. Your sweat goes into it, but the value that comes out of it goes into a stranger's pocket. Marx said this was the first wound. The thing your hands make is taken from you the moment it is finished, and it never feels like yours. The second kind of alienation is alienation from the work itself, the doing of the thing. Marx believed that one of the deepest pleasures of being human was the pleasure of working on something that mattered to you, building a house with your own design, cooking a meal for people you love, solving a problem because you actually wanted to solve it. He said that under the new system, the work was no longer yours. You did not choose it. You did not shape it. You did not decide when to start or when to stop. You were just a body inside a process someone else had designed. So even the act of working, which should be one of the most human things a person can do, became a kind of small, daily death. The third kind of alienation is alienation from other people. Marx watched the new economy turn every relationship into a calculation. The boss saw the worker as an expense. The worker saw the boss as a threat. Neighbors who used to depend on each other learned to compete instead. Friends became contacts. Love became a contract. He said that in this new world, even the warmest connections started to feel like business arrangements with feelings painted on top. People stopped being people to each other. They started being uses, threats, instruments, advantages. And once you have started seeing other people that way, you cannot easily go back. The fourth kind of alienation is the heaviest one. Marx called it alienation from species being, which is a strange phrase, but the idea inside it is beautiful. He believed that what makes a human being special, what separates a human from a fish or a horse, is the capacity to imagine, to create freely, to cooperate with others on something neither of you could build alone. He believed this was our deepest nature, and he said that under the new system, this nature was being crushed out of most people. They worked alone, they worked under orders. Their imagination was reduced to thinking about how to pay rent. The thing inside them that could have built cathedrals or written symphonies or grown gardens was being slowly starved. So they became alienated even from themselves, from what they could have been, from the larger version of themselves that they no longer had time or freedom to become. That is the framework. 4 kinds of strangeness. Strangeness from the thing you make, strangeness from the doing of it, strangeness from the people around you, and strangeness from your own deepest nature. Marx believed that a society organized around private profit and private ownership would slowly produce more and more people who suffered from all 4 at once. And he believed that at the very top of such a society, you would find individuals who had lived inside this strangeness for so long that they had stopped noticing it. They would walk around feeling free, feeling brilliant, feeling like the masters of their own lives. But underneath that feeling, they would be the most alienated people of all. They would have lost the connection to other humans so completely that they could no longer even imagine getting it back. Now picture a man. Picture him alone in a garage, drunk in the middle of the afternoon, building a machine no one else can understand. He does not work for anyone. He does not have co-workers. The thing he is building belongs entirely to him, and he will never share it. He has a daughter who craves his attention, and he treats her need as a weakness. He has a grandson who looks up to him, and he uses that grandson as a shield in dangerous situations. He used to have friends who fought beside him for a cause they believed in, and he gave that cause up. He used to have a partner he loved, and he tells the story of losing her so many different ways that we are no longer sure if any version is true. He drinks constantly. He drools when he talks. He insults the people who feed him. He invents reasons why none of it matters. He has the most powerful tool in the universe in his pocket, and he refuses to let anyone else even look at the design. He is brilliant. He is famous in his own dimension for being the most capable being who has ever lived. And he is, by his own admission, in great pain almost every minute of the day. That man is Rick Sanchez. And over the course of these next 9 sections, we are going to walk through every part of him slowly, and we are going to find that he matches the warning Marx wrote down almost 2 centuries ago with an accuracy that is genuinely strange to look at. Rick is not a communist character. Rick and Morty is not a communist show. The writers of the show, as far as anyone has said in public, were not sitting in a writer's room with a copy of the 1844 manuscripts open on the table. But the show has built, season after season, a portrait of a man who suffers from every single form of alienation Marx described, taken to its furthest possible extreme. And then the show has built around him a whole universe that operates on the same broken logic. The Citadel of Ricks, the Galactic Federation, the Council, the factories of portal fluid, the Miniverse with its hidden workers, even the wedding of Bird Person, even the death of Unity, even the burial of Morty's own corpse in the backyard. All of it fits. So the question this video is going to ask, slowly and carefully, is not whether Rick is evil or whether the show is a piece of political propaganda. The question is simpler and stranger than that. If you take the warning that Marx wrote down in 1844 and you imagine the most extreme version of the figure he was warning us about, and then you let that figure walk into a science fiction comedy and live there for 7 seasons, what would he look like? What would his relationships be like? What would he build? What would he refuse to share? What lies would he tell himself to keep going? And the answer, in almost every detail, is the man in the garage. Tonight, we are going to walk through that match piece by piece, and we are going to do it gently because the strange truth is that Rick is not just a warning. He is also a portrait of something a lot of viewers recognize in themselves and in the world around them. We have all met people who feel a little like Rick. Some of us have felt a little like Rick ourselves. The show became a phenomenon partly because it put a name and a face on a kind of loneliness that the modern world has produced at scale. Marx saw the early version of that loneliness in the smoke of the factories. The show is showing us a later version of it in the blue glow of a garage workbench at 3 in the morning. The first form of strangeness on Marx's list, the one we are going to start with in the next section, is the one that touches Rick most visibly, the strangeness that grows between people. The way the modern world teaches certain kinds of people to look at everyone around them as either a tool, a threat, or an inconvenience, and never quite as another full human being. Rick has perfected this strangeness. He has built a whole personality out of it, and the show, in its quietest moments, has shown us what it costs him. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Marx broke alienation into 4 kinds of strangeness, and the man in the garage matches all 4 with an accuracy that is genuinely strange to look at. The next section walks through the first one, the way Rick has turned every important relationship in his life, from Beth to Bird Person to Unity, into something other than a relationship. Section 2. Alienation from other people. The first thing most viewers notice about Rick, even before they understand the science fiction or the multiverse multiverse or the portal gun, is the way he treats the people around him. It is one of the very first pieces of information the show gives us. In the pilot, Rick walks into Morty's bedroom in the middle of the night, drunk, and within a few minutes he has dragged his 14-year-old grandson out of the house and into a dangerous situation in another dimension. He does not ask permission, he does not explain, he does not consider whether Morty has school the next morning, or whether Morty is afraid, or whether Morty wants to go. Morty is a tool. Morty is useful, and Rick uses him. This pattern, once you start watching for it, never stops. Rick has a daughter who has spent her whole life trying to earn his approval, and he treats her hunger for that approval as an opportunity to manipulate her. Rick has a son-in-law who is desperate to be respected by him, and Rick uses that desperation as a constant source of entertainment. Rick has a granddaughter who tries to involve him in her life, and he ignores her until he needs something from her. Rick has friends he has known for decades, comrades he once fought a war beside, and he keeps them all at a safe distance, surfacing into their lives only when he is bored or in trouble. He had a wife once, or so he says, and the most painful memories of her are folded into a story he uses as a weapon when he needs to escape from prison. Every single relationship in the man's life has been bent until it stopped being a relationship and started being something useful instead. This is the third form of alienation that Marx described. The alienation that grows between people in a society where almost every connection has been touched by calculation. Marx watched it happen in his own century. He saw friends become rivals because they were applying for the same job. He saw families fracture because there was not enough money to feed everyone, and the ones who left for the city stopped writing home. He saw marriages turn into business arrangements because love alone could not pay the rent. He said that the more a society organized itself around private gain, the more its people would slowly forget how to be with each other in any other way. They would still use the old words. They would still say things like family and friendship and love, but the meaning underneath those words would have hollowed out. What looked like a hug from the outside would feel, on the inside, like a transaction. Rick has carried this hollowing out further than almost any character in modern animation. The episode that makes it most visible is one of the simplest in the entire run. It is called Autoerotic Assimilation, and it sits in the middle of the second season. Rick and his grandchildren find a giant abandoned spaceship floating in space. They board it, and inside, Rick discovers an old lover. Unity is not a person in the ordinary sense. Unity is a hive mind, a single consciousness that takes over entire planets by occupying many bodies at once. When Rick walks onto that ship, he is meeting someone he genuinely cared about. And Unity is meeting someone Unity genuinely loved. They reunite. They go back to Unity's home planet. They spend several days inside what appears, from the outside, to be a long, happy reunion. But the show shows us something underneath. Unity is supposed to be growing. Unity has a goal, a long, slow project of joining with other hive minds across the galaxy and becoming something larger and better. When Rick is around, Unity stops growing. Unity drinks. Unity throws parties. Unity does things that are fun in the moment and harmful in the long run. Rick is not exactly forcing any of this. He is simply being himself, and being around him is enough to pull Unity off the path. By the end of the episode, Unity has realized this. Unity writes Rick a letter and leaves him. The letter is one of the most quietly devastating documents in the entire series. Unity tells Rick that Unity loves him, and Unity tells Rick that being with him makes Unity less than Unity could be. Then Unity disappears, taking the planet with him, leaving Rick alone in the dirt. What Rick does next is the moment that breaks open the surface of his character. He goes back to the garage at home. He sets up a device that will disintegrate him. He turns on a sad song. He sits down under the laser. He intends to die. The only thing that saves him is a passed out Morty rolling into the doorway by accident and breaking the line of the laser. Rick does not see Morty. Morty does not see Rick. But Morty's drunk teenage body, lying on the floor of a garage in suburban America, is the only thing standing between Rick Sanchez and his own end. You have to sit with what just happened. The smartest man in the universe just attempted to end his life because the one being he allowed himself to fully love decided that loving him was making them worse. That is not a man who does not care about other people. That is a man who has cared deeply and has built a fortress around the caring, because every time he has let it out, it has destroyed him or destroyed someone else. This is what Marx meant by alienation between humans. It is not always coldness. Sometimes it is the opposite. It is a person who feels everything so strongly that they have learned over many decades of pain that they cannot afford to feel it openly. So they retreat. They build distance. They turn every meeting into a transaction so that when the meeting ends, nothing important is lost. Rick's relationship with Morty follows the same pattern, just at a smaller scale. There are episodes where Rick risks his life to save Morty. There is a moment in a Season 1 episode called A Rickle in Time where Rick falls into a hole between dimensions because he pushed Morty to safety first. There is a moment at the end of the second season where Rick turns himself in to the entire Galactic Federation, sacrificing his freedom permanently, as far as he knows, just to make sure his family is left alone. These are not the actions of a man who feels nothing for the people in his life. These are the actions of a man who feels a great deal and refuses every time to say so out loud. Watch what happens immediately after each of these moments. Rick makes a joke. Rick changes the subject. Rick gets drunk. Rick lashes out at the person he just risked everything for. The feeling appears for a second and then he buries it, because if he looked at it directly, the entire fortress would come down. Bird Person is the friend who saw all of this most clearly. He was Rick's comrade during the rebellion against the Galactic Federation. He fought beside Rick when Rick still believed in something. And in a small moment in the first season, Bird Person reveals to the family the meaning of Rick's catchphrase, "Wubba lubba dub dub." Rick says it constantly. He says it as if it is a punchline. He says it as if it is a meaningless string of sounds. Bird Person tells them quietly that in his language, those words mean, "I am in great pain. Please help me." Rick has built his public personality around a cry for help that no one in his daily life recognizes as a cry for help. He shouts his suffering into every room he walks into, and the world hears it as a joke. This is the cruelest possible image of alienation between people. The person is trying to communicate. The structure of the relationship makes it impossible for the message to land. Beth is the inheritor of all of this. She grew up with a father who left her when she was a child and came back when she was an adult. A father who has never apologized. A father who treats her need for him as a problem to be managed. She has spent her whole life trying to earn his attention, and the show is honest about the cost. Beth has become a slightly smaller version of Rick. She is impatient with her children. She is contemptuous of her husband. She drinks. She prefers the excitement of her father's adventures to the slow, ordinary work of being a parent. In the third season, the show makes this inheritance explicit. Rick offers Beth the chance to leave her life, to be replaced by a clone, to go off into space and live the life of an adventurer. The show deliberately refuses to tell us whether the Beth we see afterwards is the original or the clone. The point is that the question itself does not matter, because Beth has already been replaced from the inside. The original Beth, the one who might have been a different kind of person, was replaced years ago by a daughter who learned to see other people the way her father sees them. Jerry sits at the bottom of this whole structure. He is, by every measure Rick uses to judge a person, a failure. He is not smart, he is not brave, he is not interesting. Rick has never tried to hide his contempt. And yet, in the small spaces of the show, we see something else. We see Rick taking Jerry on an adventure when Beth and Jerry are separating. We see Rick sometimes covering for Jerry. We see Rick, very rarely, treating Jerry like a person, rather than like a stain on the family. The show suggests that Rick recognizes in Jerry exactly the kind of ordinary, connected human being that Rick himself stopped being long ago, and the recognition makes him angry. Jerry is a reminder of a road Rick did not take, so Rick punishes him for it. Squanchy and Tammy and the wedding that ends the second season are the final piece of this picture. Rick goes to the wedding. He sees his oldest friends again. He sees Bird Person getting married. He stays in the back of the room, drinking, complaining, refusing to celebrate. And then the wedding becomes a trap. Tammy turns out to be an undercover agent of the Galactic Federation, the very government Rick and Bird Person once fought together. She kills Bird Person in front of everyone. Squanchy is left for dead. Rick escapes with his family, and his response, his immediate response, is to fly to a new planet and start again, completely alone. He does not grieve in front of anyone. He does not say Bird Person's name. He buries the loss inside himself, the way he has buried every loss. And the next time we see him, he is back to making jokes. The funeral never happens. The mourning never happens. The friend is gone, the comrade is gone, and the man in the garage cannot let himself acknowledge any of it out loud, because acknowledging it would crack the fortress. This is what Marx was warning us about. Not a man without feelings, a man with too many feelings, raised inside a structure that taught him to hide them, surrounded by a world that turned every relationship into a transaction, until the only safe move was to refuse closeness with everyone, even the people he loved most. Rick is the warning at full strength, the warning that says, if a society keeps producing people who learn to see each other as instruments, eventually it will produce someone like this. Brilliant, powerful, free, and so cut off from every other living being that he tries to disintegrate disintegrate himself in his garage at the end of an episode that most viewers remember as a comedy. The next layer of the warning is the one that explains how Rick got the power to be this alienated in the first place. The answer is in his pocket. It is the small green device that lets him walk between worlds, and the way he treats it and the way the rest of the universe fights over it is the next piece of the picture. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Rick tried to disintegrate himself in his garage after Unity left him. Bird Person translated his catchphrase as a cry for help no one heard, and every bond in the man's life has been bent into a transaction. The next section turns to the small green device in his pocket, the wars fought over its design, and what it means that he refuses to share it with anyone, including the other versions of himself. Section 3. The portal gun and private property. There is a small green device in Rick's lab coat pocket. He carries it everywhere. He sleeps with it nearby. He has built it into his belt at certain points in the show. He has even, in a few episodes, hidden it inside his own body for safekeeping. The device is shaped a little like a flashlight, with a wide circular head and a few small dials on the side. When Rick squeezes the trigger, a swirling green portal opens in front of him, and he can step through it into any other dimension in the multiverse. There are an infinite number of dimensions. The portal gun can reach all of them. It is, without exaggeration, the most powerful tool in the entire universe of the show, and it belongs to one man. To understand why this matters, we have to step back into Marx's world for a moment, because Marx had a very specific way of thinking about tools like this. He looked at the new factories of his time, and he asked the simple question, who owns the machines? The factories were full of workers, hundreds of them, sometimes thousands. Their hands made the cloth, the iron, the bricks, the bread. But the machines they used did not belong to them. The machines belonged to a small handful of men who never set foot on the factory floor. Those men owned what Marx called the means of production. They owned the tools that made everything else possible. And because they owned the tools, they decided who got to use them, on what terms, for how long, and at what price. The workers who built the world did not control any of it. The owners who never built anything controlled all of it. This, Marx said, was the real engine of inequality in the modern world. It was not just that some people had more money than others, it was that some people owned the things that made money possible, and everyone else had to come to them, hat in hand, to be allowed to work. Now look at the portal gun again with that idea in mind. The portal gun is a tool. It is, in fact, the ultimate tool. It can take you to any place, any time, any version of any reality, instantly. With it, you can find any resource, any material, any technology, any knowledge that exists anywhere in the infinite multiverse. With it, you can escape any danger. With it, you can flee any consequence. Without it, you are stuck in one dimension, one timeline, one small pocket of reality. The difference between having a portal gun and not having one is the difference between being a god and being a person. And the show makes a quiet point of telling us again and again that almost no one has one. Just Rick, just other Ricks, and no one else. This is not an accident. Rick guards the design of the portal gun with the kind of fierce attention that most people reserve for the secrets of their own lives. He refuses to share the formula for portal fluid, the chemical that powers the device, with anyone outside the closed circle of Ricks. The Galactic Federation, the great interstellar government that runs much of the known universe, has been trying for decades to crack the design. They have armies, scientists, treasuries. They cannot do it. The Council of Ricks, the ruling body of the Citadel, where every Rick from every dimension gathers, has the design, but only because every single one of them figured it out independently. They are all Rick. They all built the same thing. And even there, in a society made entirely of Ricks, the original Rick, the one we follow, considers himself the only one who really deserves to have it. He is, as the show puts it in one of its most quoted lines, the Rickest Rick, the most himself, the most owner. Think about what this means. Rick has the most powerful tool in the universe, and his deepest instinct is to keep it private. He does not want a world where everyone has a portal gun. He does not want a world where ordinary people can walk between dimensions the way they walk between rooms. He does not want a world where his power is shared. He wants the tool to belong to him and to him alone. Because the moment everyone has one, he is no longer special. His genius is no longer rare. His freedom is no longer his alone. He has built his entire identity around being the one person in the multiverse who can do this, and he will fight any war, betray any cause, and abandon any friend to keep it that way. The pilot episode of the show plants this idea in the very first scene. Rick walks into Morty's bedroom, drunk, and tells him that he is going to take him on adventures. He pulls out the portal gun. He opens a green hole in the air there, and he steps through it. The image is iconic. It has become one of the most famous opening shots in modern animation. But look at it through Marx's eyes for a moment. The grandfather has a tool the grandson does not have. The grandfather chooses where they go. The grandfather chooses what they do. The grandfather chooses when they leave. The grandson has no say in any of it because the grandson does not own the tool. He is dependent. He is, in the strict sense of the word, a worker who has shown up to use a machine that belongs to someone else. The whole shape of the relationship is set in that very first scene by who owns the device. The show makes the point even sharper in the season 3 premiere, the episode called The Rickshank Redemption. Rick has been captured by the Galactic Federation. They have him locked in a high-security mine prison, and they are trying to extract the formula for portal fluid from his brain. The entire weight of an interstellar government, with all its torturers and its scientists and its computers, is bent on getting that one piece of information out of one man's head. Why? Because if the Federation can make their own portal fluid, the Federation rules the multiverse forever. And as long as Rick keeps it secret, the Federation is just one more bureaucracy in one more dimension. Big in its own pond, but small in the larger pool. The whole Galactic Federation, in other words, has spent its existence trying to break the private property of one drunk old man in a garage. He has held them off. By the end of the episode, he has destroyed them entirely, killed billions of their citizens, and walked back to his daughter's house to make a sandwich. The Federation falls because Rick refuses to share the means of production. There is a moment in that same episode that is one of the most quietly devastating in the entire show. Rick, near the end, gives a long speech to the family. He tells them that his real motivation for everything he has just done, for destroying the Federation and overthrowing the Council of Ricks, is that he wants McDonald's to bring back a discontinued sauce from a movie tie-in promotion that ran in 1998, the Szechuan sauce. He talks about it as if it is the only thing in the universe that matters to him. The speech became famous. It launched a real-world internet movement. People petitioned McDonald's. They actually brought the sauce back. But inside the show, the speech is something darker. It is Rick refusing, even at the moment of his greatest triumph, to admit that any of it was about love, about family, about connection. He has just toppled an empire to come home, and the only explanation he is willing to give is that he wants a sauce. The portal gun makes this possible. Without the portal gun, he could not have made the gesture. With the portal gun, he can make the gesture and refuse to ever say what it meant. The Citadel of Ricks is the next layer of this. We will spend the whole next section on the Citadel, but it is worth introducing it here because the Citadel exists for one simple reason. Every Rick built his own portal gun. Every Rick refused to share it. And eventually, all those Ricks, scattered across infinite dimensions, found each other and decided to build a society together. They built a city, they built a government, they built an economy. The Citadel is, in essence, what happens when the owners of the means of production form their own private club. They gathered in one place because none of them would ever truly join a society of ordinary beings. They could only stand each other because only each other had the same tool. The Galactic Federation tried to build a different kind of order. The Federation was an empire, yes, but it was also an attempt to organize a multiverse where the powerful tools belonged to a government rather than to individuals. The Federation collected taxes. The Federation issued currency. The Federation built roads, ran schools, and managed the lives of trillions of citizens. It was a corrupt, oppressive, badly run government, but it was a government, and it represented the idea that the great tools of civilization should be controlled by something larger than a single man. Rick destroyed it. Not because the Federation was uniquely evil, although it was bad, but because the Federation was the one entity in the multiverse capable of taking his tool away from him. He killed the only force that could have made the portal gun a public good, and he did it with a smile. There is a deeper layer underneath all of this, and Marx saw it clearly in the 1800s. He said that the people who own the great tools always tell themselves a story about why they deserve to own them. The story is usually about merit, about genius, about hard work, about being special. The owners are the inventors, they say. The owners are the smartest. The owners earned this. Without the owners, the tool would not exist at all. Therefore, the tool belongs to the owners by right. Marx said this story was useful. It made the owners feel good about hoarding what they had hoarded. It made the workers feel that their poverty was their own fault for not being smart enough or hard-working enough to be owners themselves. It justified the whole arrangement. Rick's version of this story is the most extreme version possible. He tells himself and tells everyone around him that he invented the portal gun through sheer force of his own genius, that no one else in any dimension could have done what he did unless they were also some version of him, that the whole multiverse is divided divided into Ricks, who deserve power, and not Ricks, who do not. The show, in its quieter moments, suggests this story is at least partly false. Other beings have invented incredible technology. Other civilizations have built portal-like devices. The being who lives inside the Miniverse, which we will get to in a later section, invented his own world to power his own machine. Genius is not as rare as Rick wants it to be. Rick had a head start. Rick had time. Rick had luck. And Rick refuses, with everything he is, to share what he has built. The story he tells about deserving it is the same story Marx watched the factory owners tell about their machines. It is the story that lets a person sleep at night while standing on a mountain that other people helped build. This is the second piece of the warning. Marx said the modern world would produce individuals who privately owned tools so powerful that they could escape every consequence and dominate every situation. Rick is exactly that figure. The portal gun is exactly that tool. And the entire shape of his life, his power, his freedom, his cruelty, his loneliness, all of it comes from the fact that he holds the most important object in the multiverse in his pocket and will not, under any circumstance, let anyone else have one too. The next section is about what happens when you put thousands of people like that in the same city. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Rick guards the portal gun like a private kingdom. The Galactic Federation spent decades trying to crack it, and he toppled an empire rather than let anyone else have one. The next section steps into the city the other Ricks built together with the same instincts, walks through its slums and its factories, and meets the small Morty who ran for its presidency. Section 4. The Citadel of Ricks. If you wanted to know what kind of society Rick's worldview would produce, you would not have to guess. The show has built it for you, in detail, across multiple seasons, and it has shown you what life looks like inside it. The place is called the Citadel of Ricks. It is a city floating in space, hidden from the rest of the multiverse, and it is the home of every Rick from every dimension who has decided he wants to live among other Ricks. There are also Mortys there, because every Rick comes with a Morty. There are millions of them, maybe billions. The numbers are deliberately vague because the point is that the place is enormous. A whole civilization made up entirely of variations on two people, the smart old man and the nervous teenage boy. And what that civilization looks like when the show finally gives us the full tour is one of the most damning images in modern animation. The Citadel was first introduced in the first season, in an episode called Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind. We were given a brief glimpse of a council chamber, a few dozen Ricks sitting around a table, voting on issues that involved our Rick. It looked, at first, like a kind of governing body, a senate, a panel of equals. Our Rick refused to join it. He said he was not a fan of authority, even when the authority was made up entirely of versions of himself. The episode planted the idea that there was a larger Rick society somewhere out there, and then moved on. The implication at that point was that this Rick society was probably a kind of utopia, a place where the smartest beings in the multiverse had organized themselves and were getting along. After all, they were all Rick. They all had the same intelligence, the same skills, the same access to portal technology. They had no reason to be unequal. They had no reason to fight. They had no reason to exploit each other. They were the same person. The show waited 2.5 seasons before showing us what the Citadel actually looked like on the inside. The episode is called The Ricklantis Mix-Up, and it sits in the middle of the 3rd season. And it is, for the purposes of this video, one of the most important pieces of television ever produced. The episode begins with a small bait and switch. Our Rick and our Morty are about to leave on an adventure. They open a portal, they step through, and then the camera stays behind in the garage, while a different Rick and a different Morty climb out of a different portal, dressed in our Rick's clothes, trying to fool the family. We do not follow our Rick, we follow these visitors back through the portal into the city they came from. And for the rest of the episode, we are inside the Citadel, watching what life there is actually like. It is a city, a real one. It has streets, it has billboards, it has neighborhoods, it has rich parts and poor parts. It has a working class and an underclass. It has factories, it has police, it has politicians, it has elections, it has a school system, it has prisons, it has slums. The people who live there go to jobs in the morning and come home to families at night. They buy groceries, they pay rent, they worry about money, they worry about their children. Some of them are doing well, most of them are barely getting by. A few of them are very, very rich and live in tall glass towers and look down at the rest of the city with the same contempt our Rick has for the rest of the multiverse. This is the strange and important fact. The Citadel is a society of Ricks. Every one of them is smart as our Rick. Every one of them with full knowledge of how the multiverse multiverse really works. Every one of them with the philosophical conviction that nothing matters. And it has reproduced, in detail, every form of class division and every form of exploitation that exists in the worst capitalist societies in the real world. There are factory ricks who spend their entire lives on assembly lines manufacturing portal fluid. The work is dangerous. The pay is low. The factory floor is loud and cold and dirty. They are doing the same job over and over for someone else's profit. They are alienated from their labor in exactly the way Marx described. They could each, in theory, be a portal gun designer. They could each be running a research lab. They could each be exploring the multiverse. Instead, they are bolting components onto a moving belt for 10 hours a day. The system has decided what they get to be, and the system is run by other ricks. There are cop ricks who patrol the bad neighborhoods, beating up Mortys, taking bribes, covering up murders. There are politician ricks who run for office on platforms that are deliberately empty, knowing the voters cannot really change anything. There are teacher ricks who instruct young Mortys in classrooms that look exactly like American public schools, complete with the same boredom and the same hopelessness. There are Wall Street ricks who trade portal fluid futures and grow obscenely rich, while the factory ricks who actually make the fluid go home to crowded apartments. The episode walks through all of this calmly, almost like a documentary, and the cumulative effect is overwhelming. Whatever you think Rick is, whatever Rick tells himself he is, this is what a society of ricks actually looks like when you put it in one place. It looks like the worst version of the world we already live in. The genius does not save them. The intelligence does not save them. The shared philosophy does not save them. They reproduce every old pattern of inequality, because the pattern was never about ignorance. It was about who owns what and who needs what, and what people will do to each other when those two things are unequal. The Mortys have it even worse. The Citadel is full of Mortys. They are the children of the city, the dependents, the people who exist to be useful to the ricks. There is a whole part of the Citadel called Morty Town. It is a slum. It is dirty, dangerous, and abandoned by the rest of the city. The Mortys who live there work in the portal fluid mines, deep underground, where the fluid is collected from giant living organisms that have to be slowly bled out over decades. The work is brutal and short. Many of the miners die young. The Mortys who survive go home to crowded apartments and fight over scraps. Above them, the ricks of the Citadel look down and tell themselves that the Mortytown Mortys are just lazy, just stupid, just unwilling to make the most of their own potential. The story is identical to the one Marx watched the factory owners tell about the workers in his own century. Identical. There is one thread inside the Rick-Lantis mix-up that ties the whole thing together, and it is one of the most important narrative moves the show ever made. There is a Morty running for president of the Citadel. He is small. He is unremarkable. He gives a speech early in the episode that promises to fix everything. He talks about ending the inequality. He talks about giving every Morty a fair chance. He talks about the dream of a Citadel where every member is treated as a full person. The speech is moving. The Mortys cheer. He starts to win. As the campaign goes on, his speeches get sharper. His message gets clearer. He starts to call out specific abuses. He starts to name specific ricks. The other politicians try to discredit him and fail. By the end of the episode, he has won the presidency. He stands at the top of the Citadel, looking down at the city he now controls. And then he reveals what he is. We do not know it yet in this episode, although the show has been hiding clues for years. He is evil Morty. He is the Morty who has spent his entire existence in the Citadel watching how it works, and he has decided that the only correct response is to burn it down. His first act as president is to murder every member of the Council of Ricks who opposed him. His second act is to begin a long, careful project of dismantling the entire structure that the Citadel was built on. He is not running for president to fix the system. He is running for president to end it. The show has built, inside its own universe, a Marxist revolution led by the most exploited class, the Mortys, the dependent ones, the ones whose labor and whose suffering held the whole thing up. And the Morty who leads them is not a hero in the conventional sense. He is a cold, calculating, ruthless figure who has seen the truth of the Citadel and decided that no part of it deserves to survive. This is the show telling on itself. The show, which spends most of its time following Rick and presenting his worldview as cosmic insight, has built into its own architecture a society that proves Rick's worldview is wrong. The Citadel is what Rick's philosophy looks like when you let it organize a city. It does not produce freedom. It does not produce happiness. It does not produce a community of equals. It produces the same old patterns of exploitation, dressed up in the same old lies, with the only difference being that everyone involved is a genius. genius. Genius does not save them. Brilliance does not save them. The shared conviction that nothing matters does not save them. They are still trapped inside an arrangement that grinds most of them down so that a few of them can live well. Marx, in his German Ideology and elsewhere, made a specific point that lands hard here. He said that the ruling class always presents its own interests as the interests of everyone. The owners say that their good is the good of society. The rich say that their freedom is everyone's freedom. The powerful say that the rules that protect their power are universal moral truths. And the people who suffer under these arrangements are taught, slowly and constantly, to believe the same story. To accept that the powerful deserve their power. To believe that the system is the way it is because that is just how things are. The Citadel runs on this exact ideology. The factory ricks have been told their whole lives that they are simply less special than the wealthy ricks. The Mortys have been told their whole lives that they exist to serve, and most of them believe it. Until evil Morty starts speaking, and a whole generation of Mortys begins to suspect that the story they have been told is not actually true. There is one more piece of the Citadel that has to be named, because it is the piece that comes back later and brings the whole thesis of this video into sharp focus. The Citadel is held inside something the show eventually calls the central finite curve. This is a structure that we will look at carefully in a later section when we get to evil Morty's exit. For now, it is enough to say that the central finite curve is the architecture that keeps the Citadel running. It is the system that makes sure every Rick stays at the top, that every Morty stays at the bottom, and that the whole arrangement reproduces itself across infinite dimensions. The Citadel is not a city in space. It is the visible piece of a much larger machine. And the machine was built by Ricks, for Ricks, to make sure Ricks would always be in charge. This is why the Citadel matters so much for the warning Marx wrote down. Marx did not just warn us about individual alienated people. He warned us that those individuals, once they had power, would build societies in their own image. They would call those societies free. They would call those societies fair. They would call those societies the natural order of things. But underneath the words, the same old patterns would be running. The owners on top, the workers in the middle, the poor at the bottom. The ideology in everyone's head telling them that this was just how it had to be. The Citadel of Ricks is that warning brought to life on television. It is the city that Rick's philosophy builds when it is given enough room to build a city. And the show, by showing us the inside of it in one of the best episodes it ever made, has handed us the evidence we need to see Rick clearly. The next layer down, smaller and stranger, is the universe Rick built inside his car battery. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Rick guards the portal gun like a private kingdom. The Galactic Federation spent decades trying to crack it, and he toppled an empire rather than let anyone else have one. The next section steps into the city the other Ricks built together with the same instincts, walks through its slums and its factories, and meets the small Morty who ran for its presidency. Section 5. The Miniverse and the Chain of Exploitation. There is an episode in the second season where Rick's car battery dies. He is in the middle of a family road trip and the car will not start, and he opens the hood and pulls out a small black device. He fiddles with it, mutters at it, and explains, in passing, that he has to reach inside it and check on something. Then he shrinks himself down. He climbs into the battery. And what we discover when the camera follows him in is that the battery is not a battery in any normal sense. The battery is a universe. Inside the device, Rick has built a whole world, a planet with continents, with oceans, with weather, with intelligent life. A whole civilization has evolved on this planet over the course of what the inhabitants experience as thousands of years, although for Rick, only a short time has passed in the outside world. The people on the planet have built cities, they have built schools, they have built families, they have built a culture, they have built a religion, they have built, most importantly, a global infrastructure of generators, a vast network of machines that turn the natural movements of the people, their walking, their working, their daily living, into electrical energy. This energy is then channeled out of the world, up through the ground, and into the battery casing, and from there into Rick's car. The entire planet exists to power Rick's vehicle. The inhabitants do not know this. They have been told, by the religion that grew up around the generators, that producing energy is a sacred duty, the highest calling a person can have, the central meaning of life itself. They live their entire lives serving the machine. They die proud of their service. And the machine, in turn, is just a battery in a flying car driven by a man who would not even be able to point them out on a map. The episode is called The Ricks Must Be Crazy, and it is one of the most precise pieces of political science fiction ever made for animation. exploitation, although almost no one talks about it that way. To understand why, we need to spend a moment with another idea Marx kept returning to throughout his life. He was not only writing about factories in England. He was also watching what was happening at the edges of the empires of his time. He watched European countries reach across the world and take possession of huge areas of land in Africa, in Asia, in the Americas. He watched them set up systems where the people who lived in those places were forced to work under terrible conditions to extract things, gold, sugar, cotton, rubber, oil, that were then shipped back to Europe to make rich men richer. The people doing the work never saw the wealth. They never saw the markets where their products were sold. They never even saw the full picture of what they were part of. They were told by the colonial governments and by the missionaries who came with them that their labor was a kind of natural duty, a way of contributing to civilization, a path to a higher form of life. The truth, Marx said, was that they were being used. Their land was being used. Their bodies were being used. Their entire existence had been folded into a vast machine of extraction, and the machine was running for the benefit of people they would never meet in places they would never see. The Miniverse is exactly this. Rick has done, on a smaller scale, what Marx watched the great empires do on the largest scale humans had ever seen. He has created a population whose entire purpose, in his eyes, is to generate energy for his use. He has hidden the truth of their situation from them. He has even seeded their world with a religion that tells them their labor is holy, the deepest thing they can do, the purpose for which they were born. The episode is comfortable showing this clearly. We see the inhabitants of the Miniverse going to work in the morning. We see them filing into the generator stations. We see them stepping onto the treadmills that the machines convert into power. We see them doing it cheerfully because they have been told that this is what life is. They believe in it. Some of them are devoutly religious about it. The energy they produce flows up out of their world through invisible channels into the metal box that sits under the hood of Rick's car. And Rick, when his car will not start, climbs in to scold them for not working hard enough. He literally walks among them, towering above them, complaining that he is not getting enough power. He is, in this scene, almost exactly the figure that the Latin American liberation theologians of the 20th century used to describe the foreign owners of the great plantations. The man from far away, demanding more, threatening punishment, treating an entire civilization as a tool that has begun to malfunction. There is a young man in the Miniverse, a scientist named Zeep Zanflorp, who has begun to ask questions. He is the smartest person on his planet. He has noticed that the universe has strange properties. He has noticed that it almost looks designed. He has begun to investigate, and what he eventually figures out in private is that the entire world he lives in was created by someone outside it. He has cracked the secret. He understands that he and everyone he loves are living inside a battery. And his response to this discovery is one of the most quietly devastating things the show has ever produced. He decides, calmly and rationally, to do exactly the same thing to his own people that has been done to him. He builds a generator. He builds a smaller universe inside it. He populates that smaller universe with intelligent life, and he uses their labor to power his world, just as Rick uses his world to power Rick's car. When Rick discovers this, he is furious. He confronts Zeep. The two of them get into a long, loud argument about who has the right to do what. Zeep, who has only just learned the truth of his own situation, points out that Rick is doing the exact same thing on a larger scale. Rick has no good answer. He sputters. He insults Zeep. He tries to claim the moral high ground, but he has none. They eventually try to fight each other, physically, in a sequence the show plays partly for comedy, but the comedy does not erase the philosophical point. Two men who have built worlds for the sole purpose of extracting energy from the people inside them, fighting over which one of them is the real victim. Neither one of them is willing to free the people they have created. Neither one of them is willing to question whether their own world might also be inside someone else's battery. The episode does not give us that answer, but it leaves the suggestion hanging in the air. The chain might go up forever. Above Rick, perhaps another being. Above that being, another. The whole multiverse, perhaps. A stack of batteries inside batteries. Every level extracting from the level below. And somewhere at the top, if there is a top, a being who does not even know he is doing any of this, just driving his car. This is exactly the structure Marx was trying to describe at the end of his life when he wrote about what he called the world market. He was looking, in the 1860s and 70s, at the global economy that was beginning to form. He saw how raw materials extracted in one part of the world were turned into finished goods in another, sold in a third, and the profits collected in a fourth. He saw that no individual capitalist, no individual factory owner, was the villain of the whole story. Each one was just doing his small piece of the larger machine. Each one could point at the level above him and say, well, I'm only following the rules they set for me. The system, taken as a whole, was producing immense wealth and immense suffering at the same time, and almost no one inside it had a clear view of what they were really part of. The Miniverse is this insight made visible. Rick is doing it to Zeep. Zeep is doing it to his Miniverse, and whoever is doing it to Rick, if anyone is so far above him in the chain that he cannot even imagine looking up. The episode is not a one-off. The show comes back to this theme again and again with smaller variations. The Mr. Meeseeks of the first season are blue creatures that Rick can summon out of a box. Each Meeseeks is born to perform a single task. Once the task is complete, the Meeseeks dies. They are workers in the purest possible sense. They have no life outside their labor. They have no purpose outside their function. They exist to serve, and they are designed at the chemical level to suffer until they have served. The episode plays this for comedy when a Meeseeks is given an impossible task and starts to break down, screaming about how every second of existence is agony. The comedy is real, but it is built on a horror that the show does not flinch from. These are creatures designed by intelligent beings to be tools, given just enough consciousness to perform their jobs and not a drop more. When the show invites us to laugh at them, it is asking us, quietly, to notice what we are laughing at. Anatomy Park, an early first season episode, takes the same idea in a different direction. Rick has, at some point in his past, partnered with a wealthy businessman to build a theme park. The location of the park is the inside of a homeless man's body. The man, named Ruben, has agreed, in exchange for some kind of payment, to let Rick and his partner shrink themselves down and build elaborate attractions throughout his organs. He has agreed to be the territory. His liver, his lungs, his bones, all leased out, all turned into entertainment for paying customers. When Ruben dies during the episode, the park dies with him, and Rick's response is essentially to shrug and move on. The man's body was a resource. Resources run out. The colonial logic could not be plainer if the show had drawn it on a billboard. The Meeks of the Ricks Must Be Crazy episode, the same one as the Miniverse, are a third variation. They are a species Rick encounters in passing who have evolved to want to be eaten. They walk up to people in restaurants and recommend cuts of their own bodies. They are pleased when chosen. They are proud to be served. The episode does not dwell on them, but the small moment where Morty stares at one and tries to make sense of what he is seeing is one of the cleanest pieces of social commentary the show has ever produced. The Meeks have been bred, or have evolved, or have been culturally trained into wanting their own consumption. They have been turned into commodities so completely that they cannot even imagine a self that is not for sale. Marx wrote in Capital about how the deepest level of commodification is not when a person is sold, but when a person comes to believe that being sold is what they are for. The Meeks are exactly this. The show, in passing, in the background of a different story, has put the idea on screen. What all of these examples share is the same essential structure. There is a being on top, there is a being on the bottom. The being on the bottom does work or provides resources or simply exists in a way that benefits the being on top. The being on the bottom usually does not know the full picture. The being on top usually does not think about the being on the bottom very much, except when something goes wrong and the supply of work or resources is interrupted. The being on top has built an entire ideology, a whole story that explains why this arrangement is fair or natural or holy or simply the way things are. And the being on the bottom has, in most cases, been raised inside that ideology so completely that they do not even have the language to question it. This is what Marx meant when he said that the most powerful weapon of the ruling class was not the police or the army, but the story the ruling class tells about itself. The Miniverse runs on that story. The Meeks run on it. The Meeseeks run on it. The Mortys of the Citadel run on it. And Rick, the man at the top of his own little chain, runs on it too, although he has convinced himself that he sees through every story ever told and is the only being left in the universe capable of looking at things clearly. The Miniverse episode, in its final moments, has Rick climb back out of the battery, reattach it to the car, and drive away. The Miniverse keeps running. The people inside it keep working. Zeep Zandflorp keeps living his life inside a battery he now knows is a battery, with no real way to escape, and his own Miniverse goes on producing power for a man who has just learned what it feels like to be looked down at from above. None of it changes. Rick goes home, the car goes back in the garage, the family goes on with their day, and somewhere, down at the bottom of a long chain that the show suggests but does not draw, beings the size of dust are walking to work in the morning, stepping onto treadmills, generating tiny pulses of power, and never knowing why. This is the warning Marx wrote about, taken to its furthest possible extreme, played as a science fiction comedy on a Sunday night, and almost no one in the audience catches the full weight of it. The next layer of the picture is even closer to us. It is the way way Rick's universe puts a price on every kind of human experience, including the ones we still pretend cannot be bought. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Rick built a universe inside a battery and seeded it with a religion that taught the inhabitants their labor was sacred, while down the same chain, Zeep built his own. The next section follows the small green dollar sign Rick's universe stamps on every form of human experience, from contract murder to memories pulled out of a head to the love simulation he uses to humiliate his grandson. Section 6. Commodity Fetishism in the Multiverse. There is a man in one of the show's most beloved early episodes who walks into a scene wearing a perfect smile. He is a humanoid with a small mouth and clean clothes. He carries a briefcase. He is friendly. He shakes Rick's hand. He asks how Rick's day is going. He compliments the kids. He is, by every visible measure, one of the warmest characters the show has ever introduced. His name is Crumbopulous Michael, and his job is contract murder. He kills people for a living. He is, in fact, deeply enthusiastic about it. He explains, cheerfully, that he loves what he does, that he gets paid well to do it, that he has a wife at home he adores, and that his hobby is performing acts of violence on strangers he has been paid to identify. He is, in the show's logic, a model citizen, a small business owner, a reliable contractor, a man with a healthy relationship to his work. The fact that the work is killing people does not change any of the rest of it. It is a job. He is good at his job. He is happy in his job. The show plays the whole scene with a light comic touch, and Crumbopulous Michael becomes, over the course of his 3 or 4 minutes of screen time, one of the most quoted minor characters in the history of the series. Watch that scene with Marx in your head, and something in it shifts. Crumbopulous Michael is what Marx called, in different words, the perfect commodity worker. He has fully internalized the idea that any activity, any product of human effort can be bought and sold. The activity itself does not matter. The relationship to the activity does not matter. The moral weight of the activity does not matter. What matters is that there is a market for it, that he can supply that market, and that the supply and the demand can meet at a price both parties find reasonable. He is a man who has wholeheartedly accepted the logic that everything is for sale, and he has built a happy life around that acceptance. The show presents him as a comic figure. Marx would have presented him as a warning. The two readings are not in conflict. The comedy works precisely because the warning is true. This is what Marx, in the first volume of his great book Capital, called commodity fetishism. The phrase sounds technical, but the idea inside it is simple. Marx said that under capitalism, real human relationships between people who work, between people who buy, between people who depend on each other, start to look like relationships between things. A worker stops being a person and starts being labor power, something measured in hours and bought by the unit. A loaf of bread stops being the result of a baker's morning and starts being a price tag. A friendship stops being a slow accumulation of shared experiences and starts being a network of contacts you can leverage. The deeper this process goes, Marx said, the harder it becomes to even see the human beings hidden inside the web of objects and prices. The objects and the prices come to feel like the real thing, and the people behind them come to feel like accessories. This is the upside-down quality of life under capital. The dead things are alive, and the living things are flat. The Rick and Morty universe is saturated in this. Almost every episode has at least one moment where some piece of human experience that we still treat in our world as essentially priceless has been quietly turned into a commodity. The show plays these moments for jokes, but the jokes are precise. They are not random. They are pointing, with consistent aim, at the same target. Take the entire second season episode called Big Trouble in Little Sanchez. The plot involves Rick transferring his consciousness into a clone of a teenage body so that he can attend the high school Morty and Summer go to and investigate something happening there. The casual horror of the premise, that consciousness itself is a thing you can lift out of one body and drop into another, is presented with no fanfare. The show treats it as a piece of available technology, no more remarkable than a microwave. But think about what it means. If consciousness can be moved between bodies, then the body and the mind are now separable products. The body becomes a vehicle. The mind becomes content. Both can be priced. Both can be sold. Both can be replaced. Rick, in the episode, treats his original body the way a person might treat a rental car. It is parked in the garage. He will pick it back up later. The body is quite literally a commodity in this scene. It has been demoted from something sacred to something convenient. The show comes back to this idea with sharper focus in a third season episode called Morty's Mind Blowers. Rick has, it turns out, been removing memories from Morty's head whenever something traumatic happens to them. He keeps the memories in small glass jars stars on a wall in a hidden room. There are hundreds of them. Some of them are from things Rick wanted Morty to forget. Some of them are from things Rick himself wanted to forget. The wall is an archive. It is also, in the strict sense, a storage unit. The memories are objects. They sit on shelves. They can be played back, traded, reorganized, destroyed. Morty's inner life, the slow building of a self that happens through accumulated experience, has been broken into pieces and put on a shelf. Rick can pick any one of them up and look at it. He can throw any one of them away. The episode plays this for comedy and for horror at the same time. The horror is that a person's memories, the things that make a person a continuous self over time, have been turned into things. The comedy is that we recognize the move because we live in a world where every part of inner life is being sliced, packaged, and sold back to us in some form, all the time. The fourth season has an even sharper version of this in an episode called Edge of Morty. Rick gives Morty a death crystal, a small object that lets the person holding it see their own future deaths in every possible variation. Morty becomes obsessed with the crystal. He starts living his life in service of one particular future the crystal has shown him, a future in which he dies, decades later, peacefully, in the arms of the girl he loves at school. He begins to engineer his entire existence to make that one future happen. He kills people who get in the way. He destroys property. He rearranges his whole life. The crystal has done something specific to him. It has turned the future itself into a product, a possibility he can shop for, like a vacation package, like a piece of clothing. He picks the future he wants and tries to buy it with his actions. The episode does not say this in those words, but the structure is unmistakable. The crystal has commodified time. Morty's relationship to his own life has been rearranged around the purchase he is trying to make. There is an even purer example, easy to miss, in the way the show handles the entire concept of dimension hopping. Rick can leave any reality at any moment. He can, when things go wrong, find another version of the same reality where things are slightly different and step into that one instead. The first time the show makes this move, in the episode where Rick and Morty bury their own bodies in the backyard, the horror of it is the focus. By the time we get to later seasons, dimension hopping has become almost casual. Rick and Morty enter and exit dimensions like customers walking in and out of a store. The implicit logic, the one the show never names but constantly demonstrates, is that realities are now products too. Each dimension is a slightly different version of the same item, sitting on the multiverse shelf. If this one is broken, you can return it. If that one has the feature you want, you can pick it up. The infinite richness of existence, the unique, precious quality that any one reality might once have had, has been flattened into a catalog. Rick is the one shopper in the universe who has the credit to walk through the whole store. Everyone else is stuck with whichever item they were born inside. The Vat of Acid episode, in the fourth season, is the show's most direct portrait of what this kind of thinking does to love. Morty challenges one of Rick's inventions, suggesting an alternative would have been simpler. Rick, stung, builds the alternative as a cruel lesson. The alternative is a device that lets Morty save and reload his life like a video game. He can make any choice, see how it goes, and rewind if he does not like the result. Morty uses the device to live an entire long arc of life. He meets a woman on a train. He falls in love with her. He moves in with her. He spends years building a life with her. They survive a disaster together. They become each other's whole world. Then, Rick reveals the truth. The device was a trick. There was no real save and reload. There was only a simulation, a pocket reality Rick had built, in which Morty had spent years living a full romantic life that was, by Rick's design, completely consequence-free. Morty had been in love with a real person in that pocket. That person had loved him. That person had built a life around him. None of it counted. Rick used the device to make a point. The lesson, as Rick delivers it, is that questioning his ideas is foolish. The lesson, as the episode actually plays, is that Rick is willing to build a fake universe inhabited by a fake woman who genuinely loves Morty just to humiliate him. Love, in that episode, has been turned into an experimental product, built, used, destroyed when the experiment ends. The fifth season pushes the same logic into the family itself in an episode called Mortiplicity. The family is being hunted by assassins. To protect themselves, Rick has been creating decoy versions of the entire family, copies that look and act exactly like the originals, that are sent out into the world as bait. Whenever the assassins find a decoy family and kill them, a new decoy family is automatically generated to take their place. The episode reveals that this has been going on for so long and across so many layers that there is no longer any way to tell which version of the family is the original. Every Beth, every Jerry, every Summer, every Morty in the episode might be a decoy of a decoy of a decoy. They all believe they are the real ones. They all have full inner lives. They all care about each other. They all die when the assassins arrive. New ones are generated. separated. The cycle continues. The episode is an extended demonstration of what the show has been quietly suggesting for years, which is that even the closest human beings in Rick's life have been turned, by his choices, into a kind of inventory. The family is now a stockpile. The originals, if there ever were originals, are no longer findable. Whatever they once were has been replaced by a system that produces them on demand. Marx wrote, in one of his most famous lines from the Communist Manifesto, that the modern world had drowned every old form of human connection in what he called the icy water of egotistical calculation. He meant that the new economy had taken the old, slow rituals of community, the rituals that used to bind people to each other in ways that were not for sale, and had reduced them all, one by one, to transactions. The respect a worker once owed a master had been replaced by wages. The bond a peasant once felt to the land had been replaced by rent. Even, in some places, the bond between parent and child, between husband and wife, between friend and friend, had begun to feel like a contract. The line is harsh, but he was not wrong about the direction of travel. The Rick and Morty universe is what that direction looks like when you let it run for another 200 years and then add interdimensional travel. Friendship, love, memory, family, time itself, future death itself, all of it has been shrunk down, packaged up, and put on a shelf. And Rick, the man at the center of it all, walks through this priced and labeled universe with the easy confidence of a man who has never seen any of it as strange. To him, this is just how things are. This is how things have always been. This is how things will always be. Which is, of course, exactly what Marx warned us we would say once the icy water had risen high enough to cover us. There is one more piece of the warning that has to be named, and it is the largest and most important piece, the one that explains how a man can live inside this kind of universe, do the things Rick does, treat people the way Rick treats them, and never feel he is doing anything wrong. The piece is the philosophy he carries in his head, the story he tells himself about why the universe is the way it is. Marx had a name for stories like that, and the name is the spine of everything Rick believes. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Crumbopulous Michael loves his work. Morty's memories sit in jars on a wall, and the woman Morty fell in love with on the train was a simulation Rick built to win an argument. The next section turns to the philosophy Rick carries in his head, the loud, cheerful nihilism, and asks the question Marx would have asked first, which is, who exactly does that philosophy serve? Section 7. Nihilism as ruling class ideology. There is a phrase Rick has been repeating in one form or another since the very first season. He says it when someone gets upset. He says it when something terrible happens. He says it when Morty is in tears, when Beth is angry, when Jerry is begging him to take something seriously. The phrase comes in different versions, but the meaning is always the same. Nothing matters. Nobody is special. The universe does not care. And once you accept that, you can do whatever you want. Rick says it like he is offering wisdom. He says it like a teacher giving a hard but valuable lesson. He says it the way a man might say it after staring at the night sky for a long time and finally reaching the bottom of the truth. And almost everyone who watches the show has, at some point, felt the pull of it, felt the strange comfort of agreeing with him, felt the relief of imagining that maybe he is right, and the heavy, ordinary weight of caring about things might be a mistake. This is the moment in the video where we have to slow down and ask the question that has been sitting underneath everything we have already discussed. The question is one Marx asked in many different forms across his entire life. The question is this: when a powerful person tells you a story about how the world really works, who does the story serve? Not who told it, not who believes it, who does it serve? Who walks away with more after the story has been told? Who walks away with less? Marx believed that the great trick of every system of power in every century was to convince the people inside it that the rules of that system were not rules at all, but simply how things are. That the unfairness was not unfairness, but nature. That the suffering of the many was not a choice anyone had made, but a fact written into the bones of the universe. He called this trick ideology, and he said the most dangerous version of it was the version the powerful told themselves first before they ever told anyone else, because once they believed it, they could pass it down to everyone else with a clear conscience. Rick's nihilism is exactly this kind of story. It dresses itself up as cosmic insight. It presents itself as the bitter wisdom of a man who has seen too much. It comes wrapped in science, in mathematics, in interdimensional experience that no one else in the show can match. It carries the authority of his genius behind it. When Rick tells you nothing matters, he is the smartest man in the universe telling you. And the show makes it almost impossible not to take him seriously. But step back just for a moment and ask the Marx question. Who does this story serve? Who benefits when Rick believes that nothing matters. Who walks away with more every time he says it? The answer, in every case, is Rick. The philosophy is not neutral. The philosophy is not cosmic. The philosophy is not a description of the universe. The philosophy is a perfect tool, custom built to allow one specific man to do exactly what he wants to do, without ever paying any of the prices that ordinary people pay for their actions. Watch what the philosophy lets him get away with. Watch the work it does for him in episode after episode. In the first season, Rick destroys the Earth he and Morty are living in, transforming most of the human population into mutated horrors. The disaster is his fault. He made the love potion. He made the antidote that did not work. He had 100 chances to walk a different path. When the disaster is complete, he does not stay. He does not try to fix it. He does not even mourn it. He pulls out the portal gun, finds another dimension where the disaster did not happen, and moves in. The original family he leaves behind is doomed. The original Beth, the original Summer, the original Jerry, all of them, sentenced to a life of running from monsters because of what Rick did. Rick's philosophy tells him this is fine. Nothing matters. Universes are interchangeable. The Beth in the new dimension is functionally the same person as the Beth he left to die. The Summer in the new dimension is functionally the same as the Summer he abandoned. There is no real difference. There is no real loss. The math of the multiverse, in his hands, becomes a perfect blank check. Whatever he destroys can be replaced by walking next door. Whatever he ruins can be left behind. The philosophy permits him to live a life completely free of consequence, and the philosophy presents this freedom as cosmic truth rather than as the very specific privilege it actually is. Notice who else in the show gets to live by this philosophy. Notice who else has the portal gun, the genius, the multiverse access, the ability to escape any dimension he has damaged. Almost no one. The philosophy that Rick presents as a universal description of reality is, in practice, only available to one being in his world. It is a philosophy designed for a man with infinite escape routes. It does not work for the Beth he abandoned. It does not work for the original Morty's family who have to live in the Cronenberg world. It does not work for the inhabitants of the Miniverse who keep walking on their treadmills. It does not work for the factory Ricks who never get a portal gun of their own. It works only for him. And yet he speaks it as if it applies to everyone. He speaks it as if anyone who disagrees with it is simply less intelligent, less honest, less brave than he is. Marx watched factory owners speak the same way about their wealth. The poor are poor because they did not work hard enough. The rich are rich because they understood the truth of the world. The truth was never the truth. The truth was a story shaped exactly the way the powerful needed it to be. The Pickle Rick episode in the third season is the cleanest single illustration of how Rick's philosophy serves Rick. The setup is simple. The family is being asked to attend a session of family therapy. Beth has scheduled it. Beth has insisted on it. The family has problems, real ones, and a real therapist with real credentials has agreed to sit in a room with them and try to help. This is the kind of slow, ordinary, difficult work that human beings have to do if they want their relationships to survive. It is unglamorous, it is uncomfortable, it is, by every measure, the right thing to do. Rick refuses. He does not refuse openly, because that would require having an honest conversation about why he does not want to go. Instead, he engineers an escape. He turns himself into a pickle. He builds a serum that will allow him to revert later. He places the serum across the room from himself. He creates a situation in which he physically cannot attend the session, and he tells himself, and tells anyone who asks, that he did this because turning into a pickle was an interesting scientific experiment and the timing was a coincidence. What the episode reveals, slowly and brutally, is that Rick will go to almost any length to avoid this one room. The pickle plan goes wrong. He ends up in the sewer. He has to kill rats and assemble their bodies into a vehicle for himself. He has to fight his way through a foreign intelligence facility. He has to murder dozens of people who had names and lives and families in order to escape. He does all of this rather than spend 1 hour in a room with his daughter, his grandchildren, and a therapist. When he finally arrives at the therapy office, covered in blood and rat parts, the therapist sees him exactly. Her name is Dr. Wong, and she has, in the few minutes she has known him, understood Rick more clearly than the show has ever permitted any other character to understand him. She tells him, calmly, that the things he is afraid of are not danger and adventure. The things he is afraid of are repair, maintenance, the slow work of ordinary life. She tells him that she thinks some people would rather die than do that work. The look on his face when she says this is the closest he has come in the entire series to being seen. His response, however, is exactly what we should expect by now. He turns the conversation back to philosophy. He gives a speech. He tells her that her work, therapy itself is meaningless, that the human mind is just chemistry, that her field is a collection of shared illusions, that she is no different from a witch doctor, telling people stories to make them feel better. The speech is well delivered. Many viewers, when the episode aired, found it persuasive. It became one of the most quoted speeches in the show. But the speech is, in the strict Marx sense, ideology in its most naked form. Rick is not delivering cosmic truth. Rick is using the appearance of cosmic truth to escape a room he is afraid of. The philosophy is doing a job. The job is to allow Rick to walk out of therapy without having to admit, even for 1 second, that he is the one who needs it most. The grand language about meaninglessness is a screen. Behind the screen is a frightened old man who would rather kill 30 strangers than sit still while a competent woman names the shape of his pain. Dr. Wong does not get angry. She does not argue with him. She listens. She says, at the end, that she chooses to spend her life doing the work she does because she believes it helps. She does not claim cosmic certainty. She does not claim her work is the deepest truth in the universe. She simply says she believes in it, and she does it, and she has chosen this. The contrast between her and Rick is the entire moral argument of the episode. Rick has a grand philosophy that excuses him from every difficult thing. Dr. Wong has a small daily commitment that requires her to do difficult things over and over. He is the famous one. She is the one who is actually living a life that resembles a life. The episode ends with Beth choosing her father over the therapist, choosing the philosophy that excuses everything over the woman who was offering them a path forward. The show does not even have to comment on this. The picture speaks for itself. Beth has been raised inside Rick's ideology and has come to mistake it for wisdom. This is what Marx meant when he said that the dominant ideas in any society are always the ideas of the dominant class. He did not just mean that the rich own the newspapers and the schools, although he meant that too. He meant something deeper. He meant that the way a society explains itself, the stories it tells about why things are the way they are, the assumptions it treats as common sense, all of it tends to drift, over time, into shapes that suit the people who already have power. The poor learn to admire the rich. The exploited learn to blame themselves. The unhappy learn to think their unhappiness is a personal failure, rather than a feature of the arrangement they were born inside. And the powerful, sitting at the top, learn to believe that their power is the natural reward for their virtues, and that the alternative ways of living the powerless might prefer are simply childish, naive, or stupid. Rick's worldview, when you look at it from the outside, is a textbook case of this drift. He believes nothing matters. He believes connection is weakness. He believes loyalty is foolish. He believes love is chemistry. He believes the universe is cold. And every single one of these beliefs, by pure coincidence apparently, makes it easier for him to keep doing exactly what he was already doing. He never has to apologize. He never has to change. He never has to slow down. He never has to look at himself. There is one more layer to this, and it is the saddest one. Rick has not just used his philosophy to manipulate other people. He has used it on himself for so long that he can no longer get out. Marx wrote that the worst part of ideology was not when the powerful used it to lie to the powerless. The worst part was when the powerful began to believe their own lies and could no longer hear anything else. Rick is at this stage. When Dr. Wong offers him the chance to sit down and do the work, he cannot. The philosophy will not let him. The philosophy has become the wall between him and any possible repair. He has built it so high over so many years that he can no longer see over the top of it. He really does feel in his bones that nothing matters. He really does feel in his bones that connection is weakness. He really does feel in his bones that he is the only honest being in a universe of self-deceivers. And because he feels these things, he cannot accept help. He cannot stay with unity. He cannot grieve Bird Person. He cannot apologize to Beth. He cannot tell Morty he loves him. The philosophy that protects him from every consequence has also locked him out of every chance to become someone less alone. The wall keeps the world out. The wall also keeps him in. The next layer of the warning has to do with what Rick gave up to become this. Because Rick was not always a man in a garage. Rick was, once, something else. He had comrades. He had a partner. He had a fight he believed in. The philosophy did not arrive in him fully formed. It grew, slowly, over decades, in response to losses he never properly mourned and choices he never properly examined. The next section is about who Rick used to be and what he walked away from to become the man Marx was warning us about. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Rick's nihilism arrives wrapped in genius and cosmic certainty, but it does the very specific work of letting one man walk away from every consequence, while a quiet therapist named Wong hands him the diagnosis and his daughter chooses the philosophy over the cure. The next section follows the man Rick used to be, the rebel who fought the Federation beside Birdperson and Squanchy, the partner who once loved Diane, the lover Unity wrote a goodbye letter to, and the comrade he gave up to become the alienated grandfather we know now. Section 8. Birdperson, Unity, and the failed commune. There is a memory the show returns to, again and again in different forms across many seasons. The memory has a young Rick in it. He is younger than the Rick we know. His hair is a little less wild. His shoulders are a little less hunched. He is standing on a battlefield, or in a cantina, or in some smoky corner of a galaxy-spanning war, and he is not alone. He is with people. There is a tall, calm man with the head of a bird, dressed in long robes, watching the scene with steady eyes. There is a small, scruffy creature with an unpronounceable name, drinking from a bottle, laughing too loudly. There may also be a woman, somewhere just out of frame, with kind eyes, although the show has been deliberately unclear about whether she existed exactly the way Rick says she did. The young Rick in this memory is laughing, not the bitter laugh he uses now, a real laugh, the laugh of a man who is in the middle of doing something he believes in, with people he loves, against an enemy he is sure is wrong. This is the man Rick used to be, and almost everything in the present-day show is shaped, in one way or another, by the question of why he stopped being him. The show fills in the picture slowly. Birdperson is the calm one with the bird's head. He was Rick's closest comrade during what the show calls the Federation Wars, a long resistance struggle against the great interstellar government we discussed in the section on the portal gun. Squanchy is the small, loud one. He fought beside them too. Together, the three of them spent years, possibly decades, trying to bring down the Galactic Federation. They were rebels. They were soldiers in a cause. They believed the Federation was unjust. They believed an interstellar empire that controlled trillions of lives, taxed and policed and managed every world it absorbed, was a thing that deserved to be opposed. They risked their lives for this. Some of their friends died. Rick watched it. Birdperson watched it. Squanchy watched it. And whatever else is true about who Rick is now, whatever else his philosophy claims, the show has been careful to show us that he was, once, a man who did not believe nothing mattered. He believed enough to fight. He believed enough to bleed. He believed enough to spend his youth in the dust of someone else's war because he thought the war was right. This is the part of the story Marx would have wanted us to see most clearly. Marx, throughout his whole life, was not actually most interested in describing how alienation worked. He was interested in how it could be undone. He believed that the answer was not solitary genius. The answer was not an individual rising above the system through pure brilliance. The answer was collective action. People who had been separated, taught to compete, taught to see each other as obstacles, would find each other, recognize each other, and work together to build something that did not yet exist. He used a word for the kind of being a person becomes when they live inside this kind of cooperation. The word is the same one we touched on in the first section, species being, the full human capacity to imagine, to create, to make, to share, to belong to something larger than oneself. Marx believed every person had this capacity, but that the modern world made it almost impossible to use, except in brief and fragile moments. He believed the rebellion against alienation was not a private project. It was a project people did together, or did not do at all. Young Rick had this. He had comrades. He had a cause. He had what Marx would have called species being in its most vivid form. He was making history with other people. He was building something. He was, even though he never used the word, alive in exactly the way Marx said human beings were meant to be alive. And then, somewhere along the way, he gave it up. The show is careful never to give us the single moment of betrayal, because there is no single moment. It happened gradually, over years, through losses and disappointments and small accommodations. By the time the show begins, Rick is no longer a rebel. He is a private man with a private weapon, drinking alone in a private garage. The Federation he once fought is now an enemy he occasionally inconveniences for sport, rather than an empire he is trying to topple. The friends he once stood with have become old acquaintances he visits when he is bored. The cause he once bled for has become, in his current speeches, just one more illusion that intelligent people eventually grow out of. Diane is the part of this story the show treats most carefully, because the show is genuinely uncertain whether the version of her we have been given is real. The first time we hear her name is in the third season premiere, the episode where where Rick destroys the Federation. Inside his mind, while imprisoned, Rick is forced to relive a memory. The memory is of a kitchen. A young Beth is laughing on the floor. A woman is at the counter, smiling at Rick. Rick is happy. He is, for 1 second, the kind of man who could stand in a kitchen and be a husband and a father. Then, a different version of Rick, an enemy Rick from another dimension, opens a portal and throws a bomb through it. The bomb kills Diane. The bomb kills young Beth. The original Rick is left standing in the ashes of his life, and the show implies, quietly, that this is the moment everything else flowed from. The grief of that day became the rage that fueled his decades of work. The rage became the philosophy. The philosophy became the man we know. But the show does something strange with this memory. It tells us, near the end of the episode, that Rick has been deliberately fabricating false memories to confuse the Federation interrogators. We do not know if the Diane memory is one of the real ones or one of the fakes. We do not know if she existed at all. We do not know if young Beth ever died, or if she is the same Beth Rick lives with now, or if the whole story is something Rick made up to give himself a tragic origin he could point to whenever he was asked why he is the way he is. The show keeps this question open for years. Later seasons return to it, complicate it, reveal more pieces of it, contradict earlier pieces of it. By the time the show is several seasons in, we have a slightly clearer picture, including a confrontation with the version of Rick who actually killed Diane. But the original ambiguity tells us something important on its own. Rick has, for most of his life, used the story of his lost wife as the foundation of his entire philosophical position. Whether or not the story is true, the use of it is the same. He has made his grief into the proof that connection is dangerous. He has made his loss into the reason no further connection is possible. And he has done this so completely that even when the woman is in front of him, in memory, he cannot reach her. He can only point at the ashes. Marx would have recognized this move immediately. He wrote, in many places, about the way the wounded individual becomes the perfect citizen of the alienated society. The man who has been hurt once and refuses to risk being hurt again is the man who can be relied on to never form a union, to never join a movement, to never trust a comrade, to never bind himself to anything larger than his own immediate interests. Capital, Marx said, prefers the broken individual to any whole one, because the broken individual cannot organize. He cannot stand with others. He has been taught by the wound that standing with others is what got him hurt in the first place. Rick has taken this lesson to its furthest possible extreme. Whatever happened to Diane, real or invented, has become the reason he never trusts anyone again. And this not trusting, this permanent refusal to belong, is exactly what allows him to do everything we have already discussed in the previous sections. The garage, the portal gun, the Miniverse, the Citadel. None of it would be possible if Rick had stayed connected to the people he once loved. The alienation is the precondition for the power. The wound is the doorway to the throne. This is why unity matters so much. We touched on her earlier, in the second section, when we walked through Rick's relationships. But the deeper meaning of unity, the one the show keeps half hidden, is that unity was the road back. Unity was the second chance. Unity was the universe offering Rick, after all those years, the possibility of belonging to something again. And not just any something. Unity was a being who already lived, in the most literal sense possible, the way Marx imagined people might live if they ever got past alienation. Unity was many bodies acting as one mind. Unity was thousands of beings cooperating without coercion, without competition, without any of the old wounds of separated existence. Unity was, in plain language, the commune that Marx wrote about in his most hopeful pages, walking around in the form of a single tall person with a calm voice. And Rick loved her. When Rick walked onto Unity's ship in the second season, he was being offered the only thing in the universe that could have saved him. A way back into species being, a way back into connection, a way back into a kind of life that was not just one alienated man in one garage doing one private project after another. Unity wanted him. Unity remembered him. Unity was willing to try. And Rick, for a few days, tried too. The show shows him laughing again, the way he used to laugh in the old memories of the war years. He looks younger when he is with her. He looks unguarded. The character of Rick we have been watching for 2 seasons of the show briefly drops away, and underneath it is the man he might have been if he had ever made any of the choices differently. We see him for an episode, then he loses him. The reason we lose him is not external. There is no enemy, there is no Federation attack, there is no bomb. The thing that takes Rick away from Unity is Rick. He is too damaged to stay. He pulls Unity down with him. He brings out, in her, the worst version of herself. He encourages her toward parting parties and indulgence and recklessness. He distracts her from her own growth, from her own slow project of becoming something larger. Unity sees this. Unity, being mini-minded, sees it from many angles at once. And Unity does what Rick himself cannot do for himself. She lets him go. The letter she leaves him is one of the gentlest documents in the entire show. She tells him she loves him. She tells him she believes he is brilliant. She tells him that being with him is making her smaller. She tells him that she has to keep growing, and that he is in her way, and that the kindest thing she can do for both of them is leave. He reads the letter alone, in the dust, after she has departed. What he does next is the thing we already discussed, the suicide attempt in the garage. But notice now what that attempt actually meant. Rick did not try to die because he had philosophical certainty that life was meaningless. Rick tried to die because the one chance he had been given to find his way back into life had just walked away from him. And he understood, on some level he would never speak out loud, that no second chance like that was ever coming again. Unity was the door. Unity closed it. The man in the garage with the laser pointed at himself was not making a cosmic statement. He was a person who had just lost the road home and could not bear to keep walking. The suicide failed only because Morty stumbled in, drunk, and broke the beam without meaning to. The next morning, Rick got up, made breakfast, and pretended none of it had happened. He has been pretending ever since. Bird Person's death, at the end of the second season, finishes what Unity's departure started. Bird Person is killed at his own wedding by an undercover Federation agent named Tammy, who has been pretending to love him for the entire time we have known her. Squanchy is left for dead. The old comrades, the last living pieces of the cause Rick used to believe in, are scattered or destroyed in a single afternoon. The cause itself becomes, in that moment, definitively over. There is no rebellion to return to. There is no movement waiting for him. There is only the empty shell of the friendships and the family in the kitchen and the garage with the workbench and the bottle. From that point forward, Rick does not even pretend to be the man he was. He gives himself up to the Federation a few episodes later, partly to protect his family, partly because it no longer makes a real difference what happens to him. The rebel he used to be is gone. The lover he might have been with Unity is gone. The husband he might have been with Diane is gone, if there ever really was a Diane. What remains is the figure Marx warned us about, the fully alienated individual. Brilliant, powerful, free in every sense the word can carry, except the only sense that ever mattered. There is one more piece of this story that has to be named, because it is the piece that makes the warning sharpest. Rick, in the 7th season, finally finds and kills the version of himself who killed Diane. The episode is built up over years of teasing. The audience expects catharsis. The audience expects the moment of revenge to mean something. Rick gets his hands on the other Rick. He takes his time. He makes the killing slow and personal. And when it is done, when the body of the enemy is on the ground and the long chase is over, Rick is exactly the same as he was before. Nothing inside him has resolved. Nothing has been healed. The wound is still open. The garage is still empty. The Beth in the kitchen is still slightly afraid of him. The Morty he travels with is still being slowly damaged by the trip. Revenge, the thing Rick told himself for decades was the engine of his entire life, turns out to have been just one more story in the long line of stories that the alienated individual tells himself to avoid the fact that the only real way out of the wound is the slow, ordinary work of staying. He cannot stay. He could not stay with Diane, real or invented. He could not stay with Bird Person. He could not stay with Unity. He cannot stay with Beth. He cannot stay with Morty. He cannot stay with himself. The next piece of the warning is the one the show built, almost in spite of itself, to answer everything Rick stands for. Somewhere in the Citadel, a small, green-eyed Morty has been watching the whole arrangement, and he has come to a different conclusion than the one Rick reached. He has decided that the only sane response to a system like this is to walk out of it. The next section is about him. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Rick was once a rebel beside Bird Person and Squanchy, a partner to a woman the show keeps half hidden, and a lover Unity offered the road home before he chased her off. And every step of the way, he chose the garage over the company. The next section follows the small, green-eyed Morty, who watched the whole arrangement from the bottom, walked through the wall at the edge of the central finite curve, and gave the show its only character who actually answers Rick. Section 9. Evil Morty and the critic inside the system. There is a small, green-eyed Morty who has been waiting at the back of this entire show since the first season. He has been on screen for total minutes that probably add up to less than a single ordinary episode. He has spoken fewer fewer lines than most of the characters who appear in the family kitchen. And yet, by the time the show is several seasons in, he has become the most important figure in the entire run, because he is the only character in the whole multiverse who looked at the arrangement Rick built, looked at it carefully, looked at it from the bottom up, and reached a different conclusion than the one Rick reached. He is also, by the show's own admission, the closest thing to a real political thinker in the universe of the show. He is the only Morty who ever did the math. We meet him for the first time in the same first season episode where the Citadel is introduced. Close Rick counters of the Rick kind. Our Rick is being framed for the murder of other Ricks across the multiverse, and the Council of Ricks is hunting him down. Eventually, we discover that the killer is not a Rick at all. It is a Morty. A small Morty who has been controlling another Rick like a puppet, using an eye patch device, murdering his way through the Citadel from inside a captive body. When his plan is revealed, he escapes through a portal, alone, and the show lets him go. We are not told who he is. We are not told why he hates Ricks. We are not told what he wants. He simply walks away into another dimension with the eye patch covering one of his green eyes. He becomes, from that moment, the show's longest-running open question. He does not return for 2 whole seasons. When he does, in the 3rd season episode called The Ricklantis Mix-Up, he comes back disguised. He is the small, unremarkable Morty running for president of the Citadel. The show plays his entire campaign as if he were a different character, a hopeful nobody, a long-shot underdog with a beautiful speech about the dream of equality between Ricks and Mortys. The audience is meant to believe him. The Mortys of the Citadel believe him. Even some of the Ricks listen. He wins. And in the final moments of the episode, after the inauguration, after the cheering crowds, he pulls a small device from his pocket and presses a button. And several members of the old Council of Ricks are murdered in their elevator. And the camera lingers on his face, and we see the same small green eye we saw 2 years before. The Morty who killed his way through the council in season 1 has become the president of the entire Citadel in season 3. The show, by this point, has stopped pretending he is a side character. What the show is doing with him is something almost no other animated show has ever attempted. It is building, inside its own architecture, a character whose entire purpose is to perform a careful political analysis of the universe Rick lives in. Not in those exact words, never in those exact words, but the structure of his story, the shape of his conclusions, the targets of his anger, the architecture of his plan, all of it lines up with the kind of analysis Marx and the writers who came after him were doing in the 1800s. Evil Morty is the show's internal critic. He is the part of the show that is honest about what the rest of the show keeps almost dishonest. He is the answer Rick refuses to hear. The full picture of his plan does not come into focus until the season 5 finale, the episode called Rick Mirai Jack. In that episode, we learn what Evil Morty has actually been doing. We learn what he understood about the universe long before our Rick ever bothered to wonder about it. We learn what was possible and what Rick had been hiding, even from himself. The discovery is this: the entire multiverse our show takes place in, the one we have been watching for 5 seasons of adventures, is not actually the whole of reality. It is a small, enclosed pocket of reality. The pocket is called the central finite curve. The central finite curve is the region of the multiverse in which Rick is the smartest being. Outside the central finite curve, in the larger infinity beyond it, Rick is just another person. Maybe a brilliant one, maybe a clever one, but not the brightest light in any room he walks into. Our Rick, at some point in his past, working with the other Ricks of the Citadel, sealed off this pocket of reality from the rest of the multiverse. He built a wall around it. The wall is so total that, until Evil Morty discovers it, no one inside the central finite curve even suspects there is an outside. As far as the inhabitants of the pocket know, all of reality is the place where Rick is the smartest. Rick built it that way on purpose. Rick built it because the man who has structured his entire identity around being the smartest being in existence cannot tolerate the existence of beings smarter than him. So he simply removed those beings from his accessible reality. This is the most important single piece of information in the entire show. And Evil Morty is the only one who figures it out. He figures it out because he asked the question that no Rick had ever bothered to ask. The question was simple: why are there always Ricks at the top and Mortys at the bottom? Why is the structure of every reality identical? Why does every Rick travel with a Morty? He looked at all of this and he understood, before anyone else, that the answer could not possibly be coincidence. The pattern was too clean. Someone had built it. Someone had wanted it this way. And once he understood that, he asked the next question, which was the most dangerous question in the entire show. Where does it end? How big is the cage? And is there a wall around it? The wall, when he finds it, is real. He flies a small ship to the very edge of the multiverse he has known his whole life, and he runs into something solid, something invisible, something built. He does not panic. He carefully, methodically begins to study it. He spends years on this. He uses the resources of the entire Citadel, while pretending to be its president, to fund the project of breaking through. And in the final scenes of Rick Mirai Jack, he succeeds. He cuts a hole in the wall. He looks through it. And on the other side, for the first time in the show, we see the larger multiverse. The infinity Rick had hidden from him. The speech he gives, just before he walks through, is the most important monologue in the show. He delivers it to our Rick and our Morty, who have arrived too late to stop him. He tells them that he is not interested in ruling the Citadel, or in revenge against any particular Rick. He is interested only in getting out. He says, in plain words, that he does not care about killing Ricks. He cares about leaving. And then he steps through the door. This is the show, in its own architecture, finally saying the thing out loud that it has been hinting at for 5 years. Rick built the system. Rick benefits from the system. Rick keeps the system in place by making sure no one can see the edges of it. The system is not the way reality has to be. The system is a wall, deliberately constructed, deliberately maintained, deliberately hidden from the people inside it. Evil Morty is the figure who saw the wall, traced its outline, and walked through. He is the show telling us, after years of pretending otherwise, that the warning Marx wrote down really is the right way to read the man in the garage. The smartest person in the universe is only the smartest person in this particular cage, and the cage was built to keep him that way. The audience often forgets, in the long debates online about whether evil Morty is a hero or a villain, that he never does most of what we expect a villain to do. He kills Ricks, yes, but he does not kill the Mortys of the Citadel. He does not destroy the city for the sake of destruction. He does not enslave anyone. He does not build a counter-empire. He uses the system to fund his exit, and then he leaves. His project, in the end, is not the project of taking over the wall. His project is the project of going through it. He looks at the prison, he sees that the warden has rigged the place for his own benefit, and he walks out the only door. The show's reluctance to call him a hero is itself part of the warning. A figure who exposes the structure of an unjust arrangement and breaks free of it is not always going to be a clean, comforting protagonist. Sometimes, the only person willing to do that work is someone the people in power, and the people who identify with the people in power, will call a monster. The show frames him as cold and ruthless, but it does not frame him as wrong. Watch the way the show actually handles his climactic speech. The speech is logically clean, it contains no lies, he tells the truth. Our Rick, when he hears it, does not deny any of it. Our Rick has no rebuttal. He stands there, drunk and old, and he listens to the only being in the multiverse who has ever caught him, and he has nothing to say. The audience expects Rick to fire back with one of his famous speeches about how nothing matters. He does not. He cannot. The case has been made, and he has no answer. This is the show admitting that the philosophical position it has built its main character around has met its match. The cosmic certainty was provincial certainty all along. The man who claimed to have looked at the entire universe and found it empty had only looked at the part of the universe he had carefully arranged so that no one bigger than him could be inside it. The next section is the last one. It is where we step back from all of this and ask what it means that an animated comedy on television has built one of the most precise illustrations of Marx's warning that any modern fiction has produced. It is also where we ask what we are supposed to do with this picture now that we have looked at it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Evil Morty studied the Citadel from the bottom, ran for its presidency, used its resources to fund his own exit, and walked through the wall at the edge of the central finite curve while Rick stood there with nothing left to say. The next section pulls every thread of this video together, names what the warning Marx wrote down 2 centuries ago looks like when it walks around in a lab coat, and asks what a viewer is supposed to do with the picture once they have seen it. Section 10. The warning made flesh. We have walked a long road tonight, and before we close the video, it is worth standing still for a moment and looking at the whole shape of what we have seen. We started with a German philosopher who lived almost 2 centuries ago, in the smoke and noise of the early industrial cities, watching the new economy slowly change what it meant to be a human being. We named the 4 kinds of strangeness he wrote about. The strangeness from the work of your own hands, the strangeness from the doing of the work itself, the strangeness from the people around you, and the deepest strangeness of of all, the strangeness from your own deepest nature, the part of you that could have lived a fuller life if the conditions had been different. We took those 4 strangenesses and we walked them, one by one, across the figure of a fictional grandfather in a basement cable cartoon, and we found that he matched all 4 with an accuracy that should have felt like an accident, and instead felt like something the writers had constructed on purpose, even if they would never use the word. The match is not loose. The match is not metaphorical. The match is, if you sit with it for any length of time, almost embarrassing in how exact it is. Rick is alienated from other people in the precise way Marx described, and the show has shown us this through Beth, through Morty, through Bird Person, through Unity, through Diane, through every relationship the man has touched in the years we have known him. Rick owns the means of production privately, in the precise way Marx described, and the show has shown us this through the portal gun, through the wars fought over its design, through the Galactic Federation's century-long failure to crack it, through the Council of Ricks who guard it among themselves like a guild. Rick has built a society in his own image, and that society reproduces every form of class division Marx warned would emerge under the conditions Rick takes for granted. And the show has shown us this through the streets of the Citadel, through the factory Ricks, through the Morty town slums, through the brief speech of a small Morty who promised reform and turned out to be the only honest figure in the whole arrangement. Rick treats every form of human experience as a commodity, in the precise way Marx described in the first volume of Capital. And the show has shown us this through Crumbopulous Michael, through the memory jars on the wall, through the simulated love affair on the train, through the death crystals, through the decoy families, through every small piece of the inner life that has been packaged up and put on a shelf in this show's universe. Rick has built his philosophy out of his own injuries and his own privileges, and that philosophy serves him exactly the way ruling class ideology has always served the powerful, by presenting the conditions that benefit the powerful as cosmic truths that everyone else must accept. And finally, Rick has left behind every comrade, every partner, every cause, every shared purpose, every chance at the kind of cooperative life Marx believed was the deepest form of being human. And he has done this not because the universe is cruel, but because he made one choice after another over decades to retreat further into the garage every time the world offered him a way out. This is the warning made flesh. Marx wrote it in 1844. The show animated it in pieces between 2013 and now. The pieces, when assembled, form a portrait of the figure he was warning us about, taken to a more complete extreme than any 19th century philosopher could have imagined. He could not have foreseen the portal gun. He could not have foreseen the multiverse. He could not have foreseen a man with the technical capacity to extract energy from a privately created world inhabited by intelligent beings he had also privately created. He was working with the tools of his own century, but the human shape inside the warning, the alienated individual who has lost connection to other humans, to his own labor, to his own deeper nature, and who builds elaborate stories about the universe to avoid noticing what he has lost. That shape is the same now as it was then. Rick is a fictional character. The shape is real. The shape has walked among us in different forms for as long as the conditions Marx described have existed, and the conditions have been with us in deeper and stranger forms for the entire 2 centuries since he first put pen to paper. This is the part of the video where some of you may be expecting a call to action, a revolutionary closing, a line about smashing the system or building the commune or bringing down the wall. That is not what this video is for. The argument here is not that watching Rick and Morty correctly will make anyone a Marxist. The argument here is much smaller and at the same time much more personal. The argument is that the loneliness many of us feel, the alienation from our work, the sense that every relationship has begun to look like a transaction, the suspicion that the ideologies handed to us by the powerful are not exactly the cosmic truths they were sold to us as, the quiet hunger for a kind of belonging that the modern world does not seem to offer. All of this is not a private failure. It is not a personal weakness. It is not something that has to be cured with another self-help book, or another productivity system, or another podcast. It is the long shadow of a set of conditions that a German philosopher described very carefully almost 2 centuries ago, and that an animated comedy has been quietly illustrating for the last decade and a half, whether anyone in the writer's room set out to do that or not. When we recognize Rick, when we see ourselves in him, when we feel the strange comfort of his speeches about meaninglessness, what we are recognizing is not cosmic insight. We are recognizing the shape of a wound that the world we live in is very good at producing. The wound is not who we are. The wound is not all we can be. The wound is the residue of a long history, and the history has names, and the history has alternatives, and the alternatives are not nearly as foreign to us as as the people who built the cage would prefer we believe. Marx was not the only person to write about this. Many others, in many centuries, have written about it before him and after him. He was a particular voice in a much longer conversation about how to live with each other in a way that does not require any of us to become Rick Sanchez. The conversation is still going. The conversation has never stopped. There is one thing the show insists on, in spite of itself, that has to be named. Rick is the smartest character in his universe. Rick has the most power. Rick has the most freedom. And Rick is, by every measure the show offers us, the most miserable being on the screen. He is sadder than Morty. He is sadder than Beth. He is sadder than Jerry, who the show treats as a punchline. He is sadder than the strangers he kills in passing. He is so sad that he tried to die in a garage in the second season, and the only thing that stopped him was a passed-out teenager rolling into the doorway by accident. The show has built the most powerful man in fiction and made sure, over and over again, in episode after episode, that we see his loneliness. It does not let us miss it. It does not let us forget it. It will not let us walk away from this character believing that what he has is what we want. The brilliance does not save him. The freedom does not save him. The genius does not save him. The portal gun does not save him. The Miniverse does not save him. The Citadel does not save him. The science does not save him. None of it saves him. He sits in the kitchen at the end of every season exactly as alone as he was at the start of the show, holding his bottle, surrounded by people he has decided not to let close. This is the lesson, if there is a lesson. The figure Marx warned us about is real. The figure Marx warned us about can be produced by a society that organizes itself around private gain and private power. The figure Marx warned us about is brilliant, free, capable, and unhappy. The unhappiness is not incidental to the brilliance and the freedom. The unhappiness is what they cost. Marx believed the cost was too high. He believed there was another way to be a person, a way that involved staying close to other people, working alongside them, building things together, belonging to something larger than the self. He believed this not because it was a beautiful idea, although it is, but because he was watching the alternative produce wreckage on a scale that human beings had never seen before. The show, 2 centuries later, has produced its own portrait of that wreckage. The portrait is animated. The portrait is funny. The portrait is loved by millions of people who quote its lines and wear its merchandise. And the portrait is, when you look at it closely, the same warning the philosopher wrote down in a Paris notebook in 1844. The warning has not gone away. The warning has only changed costumes. There is a personal note that has to be made before this video ends. The reason it matters to walk slowly through a connection like this is not because it makes anyone clever for spotting it. It is not because it adds a layer of intellectual sophistication to a comfort show. It is because the show, when read this way, becomes a very gentle teacher. Rick is what happens when a person spends decades learning to be alone. Rick is what happens when the world rewards genius and punishes vulnerability. Rick is what happens when every relationship is reduced to a calculation and the calculations stop adding up. Rick is what happens when freedom is mistaken for the absence of obligation, and the small, still figure of Dr. Wong sitting in her office, telling him that the work of repair is boring and necessary and the only thing that ever actually heals anyone, is the figure the show offers as the alternative. She is on screen for less than 1 episode. She gets the diagnosis right, she speaks calmly, she does not raise her voice, she lets him walk out. And we, the people who have spent 10 or 15 or 20 hours of our lives watching the alienated grandfather, can choose at any time to walk in the direction of her office instead of his garage. The show built that fork in the road. It is sitting there in the 3rd season, waiting. Marx did not have a Dr. Wong. Marx had a vision of a different way to live, and he spent his whole life writing about it, and he did not live to see it. The conversation he started has continued in many languages, in many countries, in many forms ever since. Rick and Morty is, somehow, against all expectations, one more voice in that conversation. The voice is loud. The voice is animated. The voice is full of jokes about pickles and McDonald's sauce and exploding heads. But underneath the noise, the voice is saying something the philosopher would recognize. The voice is saying, look at this man. Look at what he has. Look at what he has lost. Look at what he gave up to get here. Look at the wall he built. Look at the boy who walked through it. And ask yourself, slowly and honestly, which side of the wall you would rather be standing on. That is the warning, made flesh, animated, and laid laid out in front of us across 7 seasons of one of the strangest shows in television history. It does not require us to do anything. It does not ask us to march anywhere. It only asks us to see what we are looking at. The man in the garage is not who any of us has to become. The cage is not the whole of reality. The door is not as far away as the people who built the wall would like us to believe. And the slow, ordinary, unglamorous work of staying close to the people in our lives, of caring about what we do, of refusing the philosophy that excuses everything, of belonging to something larger than ourselves, is the only kind of work that has ever, in any century, made anyone less lonely. Marx knew this. Dr. Wong knows this. The show, in its quietest moments, knows this too. And now, having walked through this video together, hopefully, we know it as well. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.